Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And for this week we got a little bit of news as well, because CCP dropped a dev blog around the story arcs that are basically really starting at this point when it comes to the faction warfare changes. And as far as I understand it, at this point the four empires are basically trying to, at least some of them are trying to also develop the same type of technology as the Triglavians have, that allows them to do something with stars. So that could be pretty interesting. We will see where CCP takes the storyline, and they sort of promised a lot of potential interaction for the players, including deciding which way some dominoes will fall, while still of course keeping the reins on some aspects of the story, because CCP has to be able to plan for certain outcomes, of course, depending on what the patch and the changes is that they want to do to the game. But it sounds pretty interesting, of course, and with things just starting now, I think that the main thing would still be at the moment to keep an eye on their Twitter feed to see if there are updates and things that you, at the moment, I would say as a non-faction warfare player, are asked to do. I don't think we have seen anything like that just yet, but it's pretty interesting and I'm definitely keeping an eye on that. There was also an announcement that there is now the possibility to put yourself on the list for like a playtest for the FPS that's being developed in London. Now it's under NDA, so that's basically not what I want to spend my time in. If I'm going to spend my time trying something out, I kind of want to be able to share that with you guys as well, but it's there. I think it's mostly through a Reddit post that you'll be able to find it, maybe a couple tweets or something like that. But that's in development, and I'm kind of hoping for a link with EVE Online. It should be an EVE themed shooter, but will there be a direct link with the server? Probably not, but who knows what CCP's plans are when it comes to that new shooter. Also, of course, something that I am personally keeping an eye on to see how all of that develops. But yeah, pretty interesting, of course. As the summer winds down, we will potentially start to see some action as well around the developments for the story arc that will all, of course, normally lead to the faction warfare update. Let's take a quick look at the New Eden store as well here. So last week I do make these just before downtime. And so last week there was then a sale that happened after downtime, or that was started just after downtime. So they're not always showing up here on the EVE Talk video, but we got the new skins, of course, as now celebrations for Kaldari have started. Pretty cool skins. You get to choose your own faction, and stuff depends on that. But yeah, quite a few options here, and we'll take a quick look at the services. We've got 12-month Omega. I think that's a package deal. Nothing says sale or anything like that, so that one is no longer up and running. Alright, that means we get to move on to the market, and we will start with the pilot services coming in at 325. And there we go, and as always we will start with Plex, with some reports last week that after making EVE Talk as well, Plex prices went crazy, and you can see that here we do have a couple of days with price above 4.5 million ISK. We're still playing with that level, but clearly there was a little bit of volume that moved here, and it doesn't take that much at this point in volume to really move the price, and at the moment it's a surge up to 4.5 million for Plex. We are selling them in Jeddah at 4.6 almost. There's someone coming in at 4.55, and then we've got a little bit happening in what's this? The other station here jumps one way. Oh, there we go. Perimeter is coming in as well. No, so everything is here, but Perimeter, the Tranquility Trading Tower, is coming in as well to plug that gap up to the 4.7 million. So quite a bit of Plex action happening, and unfortunately for those that want to Plex their accounts, it is still on the upside. Plex is going up quite sustainably, and 4.4 million as well for the buyers, so there's just no room for that. We have to accept this is the current situation for supply demand for Plex. There's way less supply than there is demand, and thus we get these very high prices. Multiple pilot train certificate cannot stay behind on a move like that. that, and so we're shooting up towards 2 billion ISK as well for the training certificate. Practically there, above 199 billion for most sellers, and buyers, first one at least, coming into almost 1.8 billion, and this really does show how volumes are going down. Well, in the Tranquility Trading Tower, some buyers are still showing up as well, and including the one that's close to 1.8 billion. But yeah, another jump up as well for the multiple pilot train certificates under pressure from Plex, of course, that have continued to rally to 1 year high points. Get a little bit of hesitation here on the 5-day moving average at the tail end, so who knows, maybe that was a little bit too much too fast. Maybe 4.5 million will become a range where we'll see a little bit of hesitation, but I think next week will tell us more, as by then the 20-day moving average should have caught up to that price range, and we'll see how things go from there. For the skill extractors, we can of course expect something similar. Yeah, exactly. Look here at the max prices going up to 550. That's a little bit too much, and so we are slowly going down now on the daily averages, everything coming together above 500 million ISK though. 525 practically for the sellers, and then 511 for the buyers. That's still a super narrow margin for something that has shot up that much, showing that it's definitely a supply side problem. There's way more buyers than suppliers of these goods at the moment, and so prices keep going up. These skill injectors should not be able to weather that storm, and yet they do keep surprising me from time to time. So while we'd reached a 1 year high point on that surge here as well, so you can see that right here, up to 880 million ISK, we are starting to lose a little bit of ground, and so maybe the first signs of plateau are starting to show up here, that we are starting to reach the new consensus prices, which might mean that Plex is not really willing to go to like 5 million ISK, and the large scale injectors can't go to 900 million ISK, but we are of course in extremely expensive territory with large scale injectors going for mostly 840 million ISK, 800 million for the first buyer as well, so super expensive. Small scale injectors, so the same thing, peaked a couple of weeks ago at 180, so probably won't see a 190 too soon, and then we're landing on 170-ish million. 173 for the sellers, 157 for the buyers. That feels like it's a little bit of margin opening up here on the small scale injectors that are a little bit more volatile than the large scale injectors. So yeah, another sign that perhaps we had a last hurrah here, and that we are starting to at least slow down on the increased price. In fact, I would say no, the exact opposite. We are starting to perhaps form a top here. As you can see, the 20-day moving average and the 5-day moving average crossing right at the tail end for the small scale injectors. Anything different here in the daily alpha injectors? No, these are continuing to go up, and this is now really going to be a test to see what CCP decides to do on this one, because we are selling them for 69 million, almost 70 million for a daily alpha injector, and buyers are forced up to 60 million as well. You can see how supply has dwindled here, and so this is now something that, potentially, I mean, it was always a little bit of speculation on my part, but potentially something that would be like a daily goal for quite a few alpha players, and from what I've read in the comments as well, some alt players as well that use this type of a metric in order to keep up with improving their characters on a daily basis. And it was around 45-50 million, sometimes even 40 million. If you could earn that in a day, you got your daily alpha injector and you're good for the day. Now it's 70 million practically. There's no supply. This is definitely a market that's starving for daily alpha injectors, and we'll see if CCP is willing to supply those at basically a cheaper price, of course. Next, we've got the hypercores that are continuing the uptrend. So at 500,000 ISK, 1 year high point for the hypercores, 520 for the sellers, 470 for the buyers. So these are still going up, just like Plex. Although here again with Plex as well, you get a small inflection point right at the tail end here as well, at 4.5 million ISK. So for pilot services, generally, of course, the uptrend is still very strong, but I'm also starting to see the first signs that perhaps the market is not willing to go all that much higher. Moving on to the minerals, let's take a look at these at 955. There we go. And as always, we start with titanium. That continues to lose a little bit of ground here, staying above 3.5, but clearly struggling to do so. You can see volumes up a little bit on the last week as well. So we are looking at 366 now, 368 for the first seller at volumes of 76 million units. But here's another 130, 130, 130, 170. So there is a lot of supply still flowing into the titanium market. Buyers at 357, there is demand as well, including 2 billion units being bought at 355 and 353 is gonna probably pretty easily defend the 3.5 price, but supplies are ample as well. And on lower activity, if you follow the subreddit, you've seen quite a few posts around all of that as well. Then of course that means that even a few 100 million units of titanium can bring the prices down a little bit. So there is continued pressure still for titanium. Pyrite was doing a little bit better, I think, last week, but you can see here over the course of this week, we're also seeing pressure with volumes, probably some supply coming in, I would say. 869, 870 for the sellers, buyers coming in at 823, and here you've got the problem of oversupply showing up. You can see the volumes for the buyers below 100 million, 10 million, something like that. Sellers 120, 211, 178 million units. That's way too much for the market, so we are clearly oversupplied for current activity. And then Mexelon should not, in my opinion, be able to weather that storm too well, and we can see that here indeed. While we were doing pretty well up until about 10 days ago, going towards 70 ISK, probably on the construction of larger ships. Eventually, of course, more supplies are alive here in HiSec, and it's a little bit too much. So you can see that 5-day moving average going back below the 20-day moving average. Pressure is back here as well, 60, 150 for the sellers and 59 is for the buyers. Still a pretty narrow margin. There is demand for these minerals, but it seems like there's still just too much supply for that coming in at the moment. In a low sec territory, we get Isogen that is still, being able to stay at around 400 ISK, pretty stable actually. If you now look back a little bit over the last couple of months, just below 400 ISK, 390 for most sellers and 376 for the buyers. So we basically stabilized on the Isogen front, I would personally say. Which way are we going to go? Well, let's be honest. I think that we might be close to a consensus price for active supply, active demand, at least for current activity. As you can see here, volumes 1.5 million, 5 million. Most are below a million, although this does look pretty structured. So this is probably one seller trying to stay under the radar by selling in batches of 1.5 million that are going up by 0.2 ISK here. But overall, we got to go back to 397 before we see what I would call those older reserves that are still, of course, plaguing this supply, oversupplying things in big batches that are keeping price in check. 64 million units at 397 for instance. We could still push through that, maybe a little bit above 400, but I don't think something like 600-700 ISK is going to come into play at current activity levels. If activity would go up, more construction, maybe a sink of some of these minerals through faction warfare or something like that coming in as well, that could mean higher prices for Isogen, because they are still there, of course, to basically prick that price at that 400 ISK mark. That's these units right here, of course. Then we've got Noxium, part of potentially the problem as well. You can see how much Noxium has lost over the course of the last 6 months, going from almost 1500 ISK to practically 750. Also stabilizing at this point, 800 for the sellers, 763 for the buyers. Volumes here, you can see we're not being plagued by old reserves, but still, in my opinion, what this means is there's on one hand a decrease in demand because of lower activity, but there's also the increase in supply because of those crazy prices that has made it possible for Noxium to lose almost 50% of its value. And this will probably mean that next to the Noxium, there's also quite a decent amount of Isogen that's being produced. If that incentive is gone a little bit, and then we could potentially see more activity after the summer, I wouldn't be surprised if there will be a turnaround here. For nullsec, super strong summer, of course. If you follow EveTalk, you know that we've had a crazy climb in prices. For instance, here is Hydrine doubling in price from 1,000 to above 2,000 ISK in about 3 months time. That's crazy. 2,052 for the sellers, 1,992 for the buyers. Volume wise, couple million. I mean, we got decent supply, but it looks like here demand is stronger by quite a bit. And then we've got Megasite that started it up a little bit earlier, but you could see start of the year a little bit above 400 and now above 1,500. That's over triple the price last 6 months, from 1,000 to 1,500, another 50% added. So definitely pretty impressive here as well. 1,613 for the sellers and 1,509 for the buyers. There is a bit of margin opening up here, and we've mentioned that quite often before as well. Megasite is slightly different in my opinion than Zydrine. I feel like Zydrine really is something that is completely in the hands of the nullsec cartels, those big groups. Basically, their supply chains are what provide oxygen. For Megasite, there are other sources like Pogven, like Wormhole Space, and so as a result, we've got a slightly lower price. We also have a little bit more margin here for Megasite. And then finally, we've got a Morphite that does a bit of a jump this week after going below 40,000 ISK. Could be investors, honestly. It is definitely possible. We haven't seen that in a couple months. Well, here once early July, and then here in March as well. Price below 40k, perhaps attracting some people to invest, and we're going up to 43,000 now for the sellers and back above 40k for the buyers as well. So that's kind of interesting to see that jump after just breaching 40k by only a hair. Very interesting move here for Morphite, showing that there is again strong demand, in my opinion, in the middle market. This especially in the current context of low activity in the game. So the people that are playing, I would say nullsec, and they are still interested in building the larger ships. Next up, we've got PI at 1710, like that, and I think I'm expecting the story to continue, although Plex is starting to show signs of perhaps forming a top, so maybe here we'll see the same. Let's get started. Here is broadcast nodes that's staying above 1.5 million. Bit of margin opening up here between sellers and buyers. 1.6 million almost for the sellers and just above 1.4 for the buyers. That's exactly what we're showing here on the chart. While prices are still high, you gotta keep in mind that there is a bit of margin opening up here, showing that maybe a demand slowdown has started. Then we've got construction blocks, starting to see a lot of volatility above 10k, with today's averages though on the minimum prices going back below 10k, so 10,500 to 9,300. So same story, we're still at really high prices. There is competition for those construction blocks, but perhaps a little bit more less demand is starting to show through here as well, opening up a substantial margin between sellers and buyers. Coolants then also went back above 10,000 ISK, actually really impressive if we consider that this decline here was a massive nerf to the water needs in general in the economy. That should not be all too easy to recover from, and yet coolants back at 10,400 and buyers are even at 10,000 ISK as well. So this one just sees super strong demand and sees very, very nice prices. Super easy to make as well, by the way. Gas planets are almost everywhere, super easy to make. Enriched uranium, seeing a little bit of hesitation here, but still, we are talking about 10,700 for the sellers, 10,120 for the buyers. That is a very nice price as well. Integrity response drones then seeing a little bit of pressure here, heading back on today's average price just above 2.5 million, 2.7 for the sellers and 2.1 for the buyers. And yeah, you can see here that clearly demand is not all that hot anymore for integrity response drones. We will see though, it's pretty obvious that they are needed in whatever it is that nullsec is making for those large ships. So I would not be surprised if that little bit of a pullback is going to start to bring in that demand yet again. Maybe they'll want to buy below 2.5 million, but I do think they'll be happy with that. Let's also keep in mind that that massive gain, it actually managed to build on that over the 4 months after the introduction. The market usually is not wrong in that direction, right? Usually going above 2.5 million, and you can see that here in June, July as well. The eventual consensus price tends to be a little bit lower because you've got this initial rush, of course, on a change, and a little bit of FOMO as well in, for instance, new ships and things like that, and trying to take advantage of the newness of everything. But here you can see in July, then we actually went up to close to 3 millionists at 2.9 million. That is super impressive and not something that happens very often on a big CCP shift like that in a price. So I would say that losing ground here is quite relative. Staying above 2.5 million, in fact at 2.7 million for the sellers, is quite impressive. Mechanical parts next. More volatility, yes, but at 1-year high prices, so this still to me counts like crazy good for the summer. Almost 12,000 for the sellers, 10,000 for the buyers though, so it's we shoot up to the 1-year high point, but the buyers now are hesitant to go higher. Miniature electronics still very strong as well. 13,500 for the sellers, 13,000 for the first buyer, 34,000 units as well. There's clearly still strong demand here. Nano factories, yeah, losing a little bit of ground from that 1 million, 950 for the sellers, 817 for the buyers. Bit of margin there as well. Organic motor applicators losing a little bit of ground here, 710 to 690. That's quite a narrow margin, but you can see the little bit of stress that's starting to build in the last couple of months. Recursive computing modules, all right, still below 1 million. Yeah, and sellers definitely competing here. 850 for the buyers. And to me feels like a decent margin. And robotics, the first signs are starting to show up here, back below 75k, 75.6 for the sellers, 73 for the buyers. So in order to then get this average result, that means that dumping to the buyers has to be in larger volumes than grabbing from the sellers. That definitely starts to feel like perhaps a shift is brewing. Rocket fuels, again, the volatility, right? The min-max prices all over the place, but let's see if we're back below 11k for the buyers. No, still above that, 12,000 to 11,200, so still very much in demand. Self-harmonizing power cores, I would say here on the chart at least, minimum prices starting to break down a little bit. 2.1 million to below 2 million for the buyers. Still, that's a narrow margin, and that's a pretty damn impressive price. Smart fab units, too low volumes to really matter, I would say, or to be part of like that big PI pool. 66,000 for the sellers, 52,000 for the buyers. So lower volumes, lower demand, bigger margin, but that's been the case for the entire summer here. Sterile conduits, flat, 950 to 880, narrow margin, that's quite okay. Supercomputers back above 75k. I would say still struggling a little bit with volumes as well. 83 to 73. Normal margin on this high price, but I think we could break down quickly. Synthetic oil then also a little bit oversupplied. 8,000 to 7,000. It's actually a normal margin, I would say. Still well within its 7 to 8k range, nothing too special. Synthetic synapses showing a little bit of sign of stress here as well. Look at today's daily averages going down, 91.5, but 79,000 for the buyers. That is clearly a sharp pullback, which again is quite relative. It's tied to implants. You can clearly see our 3 spikes due to events happening in EVE Online that created demand for implants, or potentially a lot of production of implants, and to eventually lose ground and head back for that 75k. I mean, eventually that had to happen. This is actually the strongest period in the entire year for synthetic synapses. So sure, we're losing a little bit of ground, but it's not like a complete cratering of the price. And in fact, transcranial microcontrollers are showing the other side of the coin, a bit more volatility and close to a 1-year high point. 96k now for the first seller, but you can see we went to 150 practically, and then 81k for the buyers. That does open up a substantial margin. Water-cooled CPU still very flat for 8238, so that one too low in volumes. And then wetware mainframes in general going back down. but it's the buyers. So again, 1.6 million for the sellers, 1.44 million for the buyers. Bit of a gap opening up here. So some jitters on the demand side, but summer is ending as well. So I personally am curious to see what the numbers will be for active players in September, and as CCP starts to roll out a little bit of, hopefully a little bit of hype for the faction warfare changes, if that's really broadly available for players, very accessible, might really be something that will change the activity in the game. And then potentially we'll see, of course, the question then will be, will they also start to produce PI and then flood the market, continuing in or turning a more balanced situation, to my surprise, over the summer into an oversupply situation? Or will they want ships, need resources, and will that create more demand despite these high prices? That's going to be the whole question. So definitely stuff to look forward to, I would say. Advanced Moon Materials next, 2555. Before I get started, I do want to mention that I made my first move, so I want to be as transparent as possible. Photonic Metamaterials bought 7k a unit after taxes, and I got 100 million is what I invested in there, grabbed all of them. The Machina has been bought as well. So I have started to consider the possibility that we will be bottoming out here as the summer ends. So let's get started first with the carbide. Here is a Fernite carbide for, we usually start with Galente, which is, god damn it, here we go, crystalline carbonite. And potentially, I think one of the signs for me is that you can start to see a June, July bottom, tail end of August starting to go up, and crystalline carbonite well above 100. This all of a sudden 113 to 104. So is this the bottom? I don't know, but we are clearly starting to show signs that there is a little bit more of a higher price to be had here. Then we've got Caldari, which is for titanium carbides, easily defending the bottom ranges. So 100 disc not in play at the moment, 158 to 141, and you can see there are still sellers, pretty respectable volumes, but there's not that many of them. Maybe we can take a quick look. Nope, look at that, everything is right here in GTAT. This is all there is for titanium carbide. Then for Minmatar, here is Fernite carbide staying above 100. Let's see if we are, yep, just above 100 for the sellers. 100 disc for the first buyer as well, with 15 million units. That is also quite a decent amount. And then for Amar, it's tungsten carbide. That's also well above 125. So again, that may, in this case, June, July bottom. I think it may be for me. I may be wrong on that, I fully admit it, but this summer is ending. I do think that if there's going to be a shift, it could be now. 129 to 121, actually probably more expensive than the Caldari one, or quick check. No, Caldari actually quite a bit more expensive still, but nice catch up from the Amar carbide material. Then the metamaterials, which is where I made my move. I'll actually maybe keep that open. Let's start with Galente, which is the one that I thought would be pretty interesting. You can see right here, we touched 7,000 disc on the average prices. I've been pretty lucky. That's where I made my move on this side of the chart. So that's where a buy order can grab or can be lucky enough to trigger. And then you can see right after that, basically we started to go back up. Sellers are up to 8,000 disc on a drying up of supply. So this could get plugged and we could see even lower prices, but buyers have gone above 7,000 disc here as well. And I was well below that in order to get a 7k after taxes. So to me, I think this one made sense, especially if we look at the other ones. So here is Caldari, non-linear metamaterials. Sure, it's low. It's also at a 1 year low point, but it's 12.4 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. So let's keep that 7,000 price range in mind. Felt really good. Then we've got Minmator, which is this one, plasmonic metamaterials, also really low, but again above 10k, 10,670 to 10,520. And so here you can see margin is completely gone. There is demand at this price range. And then terahertz metamaterials for Amar is just below 10,000 disk. Now for the sellers, 9.6 for the buyer. So again, it's really narrow margin. You are buying below 10,000. That may be my next move here as well. But the difference between all of these, right, 10k being in play for all three of them, and then 7,000 disk for the Galente one, to me, that was like, that's a serious imbalance that could see some profits if that comes together a little bit. So there you go. That was my move last week on these advanced boom materials. There are still the others to get a feel of what's happening in general. Fermionic condensates flat at its 1 year low range, 36.5 to 34. So even still a little bit of margin to my surprise. Then we get the ferrogel, broke back down below 20,000 disks, so very close to a 1 year low point. Next we've got our Fullerites going back below 500 disk. If you're looking for the bottom, this one is not looking too good. 490 to 476. I mean, we touched 400 disk on a couple of occasions though, so we still have a ways to go. But still, pressure is definitely the team here. Are we below 5k for the sellers? Yeah, 486 for the buyers, for the sellers here, excuse me, 47 for the buyers. So huge pressure here yet again. Nano transistors, right, try to get back a little bit, but from a 1 year low point, and already the pressure is back. Phenolic composites still under pressure, close to 1 year low points. Pressurized oxidizers starting to see some pressure as well. Reinforced carbon fiber as well. And finally ceramic fibers just back at a 1 year low point at 200 disk, 201 to 188. So I would say I made my move on the Tech 2 items that are needed for like Tech 2 ships, and I think for some weapon systems as well. These other advanced boom materials, if you also believe that there will be a bottom over the course of the summer, then this could still be the time to make a move on these. For instance, this ceramic fiber chart does look really good to make a jump in on that one as well. So there's definitely stuff to consider, I think, here. But perhaps there's a lag between the carbides that were the first one to bottom out. Now the metamaterials, well, they are close to their low points, but I'd say there's decently strong demand, and then maybe soon the others will also follow suit. I don't really know enough about all the processes as to how they are made and how those resources, the basic resources, are mined to gauge if that's the case, but for now I'm going to take that gamble, and I might actually look at buying a little bit more in advanced boom materials over the coming weeks. Next up, Tech 2 ships then, coming in at 32.40. There we go. And so yeah, again, the Mackinac 173 after taxes, I bought that one last week. Didn't make any more moves on the others, although if I'm not mistaken, Cerberus looked pretty good. I did take a look at that. So Basilisk back under pressure as well, a little bit of a bump, but from a 1 year low point, 114 to 111. That still feels pretty damn cheap on this 1 year chart. Then the Cerberus, yeah, look at that. A little bit of hesitation as well, but just it cannot stop. The pressure is huge, 134 to 119 for the Cerberus 1 year low point. Next here we've got the Curse, so a little bit of a bump as well. Pressure is mounting, buyers back below 130 already, 133 to 123. Damnation holding on to the slight gains that it did above 250, 278 to 260. Then we've got the Deacon. I think that one moved. Yeah, that one moved. Look at that. Pretty sharp increase in price, which again, I mean, I didn't buy any Deacons or anything like that, but logistics, frigate, and so I mentioned that if I was expecting volatility and if I was looking to actively trade, I would be looking at the small ships that where, you know, a big purchase can actually move the price quite a little bit. And so here you could have probably easily bought I mean, close to this average price here, let's say close to 16 million, and now it's 27 million for the sellers. We're dry, no deacons, still 15 for the buyers, right? So they know that that supply is going to come, but this is clearly a nice sell opportunity for those that were brave enough to buy some 16 million ISK deacons, 10 million to be made, with that same warning that I also try to mention every single time, right? Don't buy like 20, 30, 40 of them. You're just gonna wreck the market if that's what your next sell order is going to be. But yeah, if you just have to sell like, let's say 4 of them or something like that, dump one at 25, look what's happening, dump a couple at 24.9, something like that, and on this downside, you're likely to actually take some profits there. Next, we've got the Eagle, so also jump back up from a 1-year low point, and we are seeing pressure yet again. So be careful, right? And same story. I am doing that balance between looking for the right price to jump in and also having potential use for the ships. Inflection point here for the EOS, 1-year low point at 220. Sellers are back up now to 255, buyers 222. So you're still really cheap on the EOS here as well, which I have one that I bought at like 254 or something like that. So a little bit early from that perspective. But yeah, planning to use it again. So the Aries interdictor, little bit of a move up, but you know, from a 1-year low point. So this is just a normal correction, and you can see we're already in my opinion starting to hesitate at the tail end to go higher. Flycatcher landing on 40 million to 39 million. Look at the supply numbers, they're still very high, 35 here. So that's what I would not do, right? This is going to just, you know, force that 39 million 40 million range for quite a while until potentially this is filled up. It's a way to trade as well, but if you disregarded that, then we could shoot through to 37.5 relatively quickly. And if you, let's say, go for 30 or so, yeah, then you're just gone. You're in the 25 million range. So this is basically spoiling the party a little bit for us to see the flycatchers go well below 40 on the average prices. Pronounced 1-year low point, very clear jumping point. It's unfortunate, but yeah, that happens as well, of course. Then we've got the Guardian, yeah, from a 1-year low point, made its way back to 130, and you can see in the last couple of days already going down, 126 to 114. Heretic, flat at a 1-year low point, so that's not great. 31.7 to 30 million, that's 8 of them that can be absorbed. I'd love to see it below 30 for the buyers. That's where I would probably start looking at that as a potential investment. The Hound still not really willing to go down that much, 18 to 18 million as well, buyers, so pretty strong demand. Ikitursa continuing the very agonizing and slow downtrend, 472 to 460. Then we've got the Ishtar, so a little bump from a 1-year low point below 130, and look at that pressure already back, 125 to 120. Then we've got the Kirin, 1-year low point as well. Starts to be interesting to me, right? Very pronounced 1-year low point. Let's see where the buyers are at. 14 million to 11,370. You know, 12.5 after taxes, something like that. Should be easy to grab a couple of Kirins at. And to me, that does look pretty interesting. Small logistics frigate, alliance tournament coming. Who knows? It could be interesting. Faction warfare, maybe small groups with some logistics frigates. Could be something to look into. Then we've got the Manticore, so the stealth bombers are away mostly from their 1-year low points. Almost 20 for the sellers, 16 for the buyers, so a bit of pressure starting to build up here again as well. Nemesis, bit of pressure, but you know, not low enough to be that 1-year low point to jump in. Nighthawk, 1-year low point as well, 243 to 221. I have one, planning to use one, but bought early again on this one as well. You know, for your consideration, super cheap Nighthawk command ship. Then we get the Oneros back above 100 million, yeah, 110 to 88 though. So here looks like this could be still a buy opportunity, but you know, keep that in mind. We're on the other side of the chart, we're in the upswing of the chart. On this side, it's way easier to grab an on Nero's close to 90 million than on this part of the chart. So you could still try, but I think you'll need to pay up a bigger premium than a couple of weeks ago. Then we get a purifier, pressure is back on, but we're not at a 1 year low point, so look for buyers below 15, 14.5. You could maybe try that, right? We're on the downside. You can see those minimum prices starting to drop down substantially. You know, it's something to consider. You're buying below 15 million, maybe be aggressive enough on that, I would say, but it's possible. Then we get a rook, you know, not the 1 year low point just yet, but the pressure is just almost everywhere. Here's the saber, made its way back up well above 40 million, but those buyers, they're stuck at 40. Then we've got the scalpel here next, a little bit of a bump as well from a 1 year low point up to 20. The pressure is just unstoppable. Scimitar, super close to a 1 year low point yet again, 106 to 105 million. Yeah, 555 here, so it's gonna be tricky. And then 20, ouch, that hurts, right? If these had been smaller volumes, I think we could push below 100 million, but the demand is there at those prices, of course. It's not to say that you know, we're gonna blame those people that put up a big buy order trying to constantly. So what they are doing, which is also actually smart, is they're trying to constantly bounce into those decreasing prices and then snag 1, snag 2, snag 3, and but they are basically that bottom where the market keeps hitting into, and everything that triggers, of course, is pure profit at that point as well. So Sleipnir up a little bit for the week, but yeah, still of course super cheap. Vagabond very flat below 150, and then finally the Zarmast. Yeah, close to a 1 year low point, especially on the 5-day moving average. We're talking 399.9 for the sellers and 353 for the buyers. Very cool logistics cruiser. Potentially also something for the Alliance tournament. It is something to consider. It is, of course, a step up from all the other prizes at 400 million ISK. Next up, the Tech 3 ships then, coming in at 4140. Like that. Let's see, we don't expect too much of a move here, to be honest. So here is the Confessor, a little bit of pressure on the price, going back below 50 million, so just below 50 for the sellers, and it's on not a lot of demand. That drops off. Well, there's 48 million in another station. A little bit weird to put up the buy order there, but all right. Then we've got the Hecate that is also seeing some pressure, but staying healthily above 50. 54 almost for the sellers, 51.5 for the buyers. Not a lot of buyers again. Then we've got the Jackdaw. Average price above 50 at 52.4, and then 48 million for the buyers. Must also mean a drop off in buyers there. And then the Zwepel is basically still flat for the week, 45 to 41 million. In my opinion, the story here is the same as it's been since a lot of these changes. The problem is that while the cost of producing these tactical destroyers has gone up because of the amount of gas needed for the faction ships, the extra problem that they're suffering with now is that their value proposition has just gone down massively compared to Tech 2 ships, and that is the problem now, and that's why you're seeing no demand, but the production costs are what they are, and so they're staying very expensive with just tiny volumes. For the cruisers, it's a little bit better. So here we get the Legion. You can see the cruiser chart, nice and bumpy. That's really good for traders, of course. So we're constantly on the lookout for those buy opportunities and sell opportunities here, like when those minimum prices drop off a cliff early August right here. So you had maybe a small opportunity to sell close to 190 here on a couple of days. But now we are starting to see a little bit of pressure, so 181 to 175, that's right, no man's land. That's not where you want to be to either sell or buy, but you of course have to cross that threshold as well. Then we've got the Loki back up, all right, and look at that, couple of days where you could have probably bought below 180, and now you're selling at 200 million, still just above 180 for the buyers, but that sell opportunity is right here for the Loki, 20 million on a 180 purchase. it's not great, but it is a trade that you could have made. Then we've got the Proteus still seeing some pressure, so I'd love to see us like drop off sharply enough. Let's see what that touched. Yeah, the 160 can even come into play on the Proteus market, 185 to 172. So that's another no. And then the Tengu went below 170 right here, early August. So that was a super nice jumping point. You're selling at 190. It's not a 20 million difference, 180 for the buyers. So unfortunately, for those that are still looking to trade in the cruiser for this week, we are a little bit in no man's land. Sell opportunity for the Loki, but that is it. And look out though, because if that pressure continues, which it has before, you can potentially spot with those minimum prices here, especially those nice buy opportunities, and yeah, you get some pretty nice potential trading that can be done in the strategic cruisers. So the destroyers, unfortunately, that market is not too hot. Then for the extra product for the week, we are going to take a look at some gas products, and that's coming in at 45.25. Let's go. Manufacturing and research, materials, gas, cloud materials. There we go. Let's see. We'll try to go over all of these. First of all, boosters first, or full range is what we usually do first. So here are Fullerite C28 going up. Not a 1-year high point, but clearly at a super high range at the moment. 14, 15, 16k come into play quickly. 14k as well for the buyers. C32 also making its way up to 20,000 disc. It's not, again, not a 1-year high point, but clearly the last month has meant an upshot in demand here. C320 is just still pretty cheap at 30,000. It's relative. C50 starting to see some upside potential, only a little bit, but all right. C540 is flat. C60 slightly up to 37,000. Well, slightly up, I should say. It's not a spike from May up to 8,750, but it is still 3,750, which is the highest point for the rest of the chart. C70 going up, same story. Look at that, sellers coming in now at 7,560. C72 going up above 7,500 as well, and C84 going up to 10,000 discs. So this is not good news, I would say, for in all likeliness our tactical destroyers, because that's really expensive. Gas market, I think we'll see that across the board, considering what we're seeing here in the full arenas. But yeah, very expensive, close to what happened about a year ago. So second highest point, you could say, for the year for most of these. So whatever requires these is going to be pretty damn expensive. Then we got our booster gas cloud, which is Cito and Miko. Don't ask me what makes what and what does what, but Amber Cito actually decently flat on the average range if we consider this a high range over the winter fall, above 100,000 price per unit. This now 70k, 63k. I'd still call it relatively expensive, but it's doable. And then we've got the Miko, that's going back up towards 75k, clearly the high end of the range. So let's see if that trend continues. Azure is Cito is actually pretty cheap. Azure Miko is expensive at 50k. Yeah, Celadon Cito actually going up. All right, another one going up to an above average price. Celadon Miko, very expensive. Golden Cito, cheap, close to 1-year low point in fact, and Golden Miko, very expensive at 75k, up as well over the last month. Lime Cito, very cheap. Lime Miko, 75k, so decently expensive, but an impressive plateau in June, July here, close to 100,000 disc. Malachite Cito, a little bit of a jump in the last couple of days. Not sure if 75k will be. Look at that, 65 is already coming in, but a little bit of surprise jump. And Malachite Cito, well above average, not the most expensive, but well above average. Then we get Vermilion Cito losing a bit of ground after a May bump. Vermilion Cito well above average. And then Viridian Cito inexpensive. Viridian Miko expensive at 100,000 unit is a pop. So I would say in general, very, very expensive gas still. So not good news for faction ships, not good news for our tactical destroyers, which I think is why that value proposition, demand is going down for those tactical destroyers, but the costs are staying high, and so that it's just volumes that are going down in those markets. Not good for active traders. We'll take a quick look at some of these compressed gases. You can see it's actually a pretty impressive list as well. And you can also see from this chart, these are pretty new since gas compression hasn't been in the game that long. And so a little bit of, while quite often these prices are high for the base product, you could see a little bit of pressure here as more compression potential comes online and it's being used more often. So I would say that's probably what's happening for Amber Cito and Amber Miko as well. Last couple of months you can see that May spike is here at 150, but now we are seeing a little bit of pressure right there. Azure Cito, constant pressure, just more supply coming online. Compressed Azure Miko, May spike, and then a bit of supply coming online. It's clearly in the... Ooh. Alright, Celadon Cito Saracen, actually pretty expensive. Celadon Miko, 100k as well. C30, C28 going up together with the market. Alright, C32 going up together with the market. C320 going back down. C50 still seeing that pressure. Okay, I'm just gonna go over these charts and see if we can spot anything that's really unusual. But in general, right, we have to accept that this is a newer market, that it still has some growing pains. Basically, right, Golden Miko is also going down despite the fact that we just saw the Miko itself go up. And so that just means that, yeah, people are getting into that gas compression. You can also see on the daily volumes that it's not traded often enough to already make sense of things. Here we do have daily volumes for compressed lime. That's still going down, so it basically, in my opinion, means that the compressed gas market is becoming more and more mature. Eventually we will get a very close correlation between what happens in the regular booster gas clouds and then the compressed gas category, but we're not there yet. Basically, these prices for compressed gas is still under pressure just because availability is slowly increasing. Probably one of the slowest ones. In general, you usually on an introduction of an item see a bit of a gold rush, right? Which, oh, I should actually maybe show that as well. You usually get like a gold rush right at the start, and then you start to get that steady decline, and eventually you stabilize probably a couple of months in, and then you start to move with the market. But what's happening here is we got a May spike that was really pronounced in the raw materials as well. If we go here, for instance, right, that May spike. And that was already translated into a lot of these, except for the, yeah, not all of them, but in quite a few of them, we did get that boost here as well. And then we start to get back on that train of, all right, availability is increasing. And so we get general pressure despite what the raw materials market itself is doing. So yeah, we need a little bit more patience, I think, for this full gas cloud materials section to move in tandem with the changes in the general market. But there you go, guys. That is it for this EVE Talk then. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.